On September 15th, 2025, 21-year-old freshman Damartravian Trey Reed was found hanging from a tree near Delta State University's pickleball courts. Classes were canceled. Officials said that there was no immediate sign of foul play, and a preliminary autopsy reported findings consistent with hanging. Trey's family received confusing information from the beginning, then they watched the rumors explode online, including claims of broken bones and blunt force trauma. A second autopsy has taken place, but what did the first one really show? Who was Trey beyond the headlines? If you want to know some of the answers to these questions like I did, stay tuned. Welcome to True Crime Nurse, everyone. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go. All right, guys, let's get into today's case. Damartravian Trey Reed was a young man full of life and dreams, and he had loved ones who absolutely treasured him. Born and raised in a small city of Grenada, Mississippi, Trey was known by family and friends for his warm, fun-loving spirit. His uncle, Reverend Jerry Reed, described him as a very happy young man filled with joy, purpose, and obedience. Trey grew up attending church with his family every other Sunday, and he attended Living Faith Miracle Temple, Church of God in Christ in Grenada, where his uncle was a reverend. Faith and family were central parts of his life. Trey's mother, Sophia, and relatives emphasized that he was so ambitious and hopeful about his future. At 21, he had just embarked on a new chapter as a freshman at Delta State University, enrolling in the fall of 2025. He'd only been on campus for about a month when today's story took place. According to his family, Trey had always dreamt of furthering his education, and then he wanted to pursue a career as a truck driver, following in the footsteps of his uncle Jerry, who had been a truck driver for over 30 years. Trey looked up to his uncle and pictured himself on the open road one day, driving an 18-wheeler and building a beautiful life for himself. Trey was deeply loved and had a promising future ahead of him. His family paints a picture of a respectful young man who had never shown any signs of wanting his life to be over. In early September 2025, just 2 weeks before his death, Trey had visited home to spend time with his family at the annual Grenada Day celebration on September 3rd, and he had so much fun. Relatives later said that he seemed to be in really good spirits that day, just joking around and being himself. There were no warning signs of any trouble and no hint of depression or conflict, and that foreshadowed what would happen. As Trey returned to DSU, nothing seemed off. In the span of a normal school day, their vibrant son and nephew went from attending classes and settling into dorm life to being found dead on campus. For Trey's mother, grandfather, uncle, and extended family, the abrupt loss seemed almost impossible to fathom. Civil rights lawyer Ben Crump, who the Reeds also hired to help investigate, reflected on Trey's life in a statement by saying that the young man was full of promise and warmth, and he was deeply loved and respected by everybody that knew him. That fullness of promise and a life with so much potential was tragically cut short. If that name, by the way, Ben Crump, sounds familiar to you, he is the lawyer also representing Shanquella Robinson and her family. On Monday, September 15th, 2025, the Delta State campus awoke to a tragic nightmare. At 7:05 that morning, university staff was making morning rounds when they discovered a horrifying sight. Trey Reed's body was hanging from a tree in the central campus grounds. The location was in a grassy area not far from the dorms in an open, visible spot at the heart of the school. Within minutes, campus authorities were alerted. At 7:32 in the morning, the police department notified the Bolivar County Coroner's Office that an unresponsive student had been found. First responders blocked off the scene and quickly identified the victim as 21-year-old Trey Reed, who was living on campus. Delta State University officials moved quickly to contain the situation and inform law enforcement. The university was celebrating its centennial anniversary that week, but all plans for the festivities came to an abrupt halt. That Monday, the administration canceled classes and all campus events. Students woke up to the news that one of their fellow students had died under disturbing circumstances, and on social media, photos and reports began circulating of police vehicles on the quad and yellow caution tape surrounding the trees. Campus Police Chief Mike Peeler addressed the public later that day, attempting to reassure everyone that there was no ongoing threat at DSU. He stated that investigators found no evidence of foul play at the scene and that the incident seemed to be isolated. The authorities almost immediately decided that Trey had to have done this to himself. They emphasized that the campus was safe and that additional law enforcement resources had been brought in to assist the investigation. At the same time, Bolivar County coroner's officials conducted a preliminary exam of Trey's body on site. Earlier that afternoon, Deputy Coroner Murray Rourke reported that he saw no obvious injuries to Trey's body aside from those consistent with hanging. He stated that Trey's limbs were intact with no broken bones or signs of assault, and there were also no lacerations or unusual bruises on his initial assessment. Rourke suggested that once again, Trey had to have done this to himself. By that evening, Bolivar County Coroner Randolph Rudy Seals Jr. repeated the same findings that Rourke did. These statements were meant to shut down all the speculation that Trey might have been beaten or worse, but for many, this didn't shut down anything. There were still so many questions to be answered. Even though officials were playing it calm, the scene itself was undeniably chilling. For a little bit of background information, Delta State is a relatively small public university of about 2,700 students, and about 42% are Black and 48% are white. Many students knew Trey from classes and dorm life, and even those who didn't were traumatized by what happened. Sometime around 9:15 in the morning of the 15th, the officers from the Grenada County Sheriff's Department arrived at Trey's grandparents' home to deliver the awful news. However, what they told the family was unclear. Vanessa Jones, who is one of the attorneys representing the Reed family, said that they informed the family that Trey was found dead in his dorm room in his bed. This was obviously not true. Trey had been found outside, not near his dorm. But Trey's grandmother, desperate for answers, asked the officers if he was found on the floor or in his bed, but the deputies said that they didn't know. They gave the family the contact information for DSU's police chief and left after offering a prayer to the grieving family. It seems to me that these officers were sent there without much information at all to provide the family, but let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Hours later, the family discovered from news outlets and social media that Trey had been found in the middle of campus, nowhere near his dorm room. This was deeply upsetting to them. Law enforcement officials later insisted that it was just a big misunderstanding because Grenada County Chief Deputy Rick Williamson said he never specified the location of Trey's body when notifying the family, claiming that he had only said that Trey had been found deceased at DSU and that no foul play was suspected. According to Williamson, any mention of a dorm room may have come from the family's questions rather than the officer's statements. Regardless of how the miscommunication happened, the result was that Trey's loved ones were initially led to picture him dying peacefully in his sleep in his bed, only to later find out the far more horrifying reality. This would ignite the family's growing mistrust towards the investigation. By Monday afternoon, Trey's body was sent to the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's office in Jackson for a full autopsy. A joint investigation team was formed involving the DSU campus police, the Cleveland Police Department, the Bolivar County Sheriff's Office, and the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. FBI agents were also monitoring the situation at the request of federal officials, given the potential civil rights involvement in this case. On Tuesday, September 16th, less than 24 hours after Trey's body was found, his family decided to hold a press conference. Dozens of relatives, friends, and community supporters gathered at Living Faith Miracle Temple Church of God in Christ in Grenada, in the family's hometown, to demand answers. The church pews were filled with mourning family and community members. Leading the event was Vanessa J. Jones, who again is a Hattiesburg-based attorney representing the Reed family. Jones said, quote, "The family does not know exactly what happened on September 15th of 2025. We are seeking answers from Delta State University. We're seeking answers from the coroner's office," end quote. Behind her, Trey's relatives were all nodding in agreement. Jones emphasized that the family had been left completely in the dark in the aftermath of Trey's death, learning critical details from news reports rather than directly from the authorities. Their hope in going public was to force a more transparent conversation with investigators because they had been failed already by that point. One of the first issues the family wanted addressed was the initial misinformation about Trey's death taking place in his dorm room. Because of this, Vanessa Jones made it clear that the family was not drawing conclusions, but they were insisting on a full, independent investigation. The family called for an independent autopsy to be done, not relying solely on the state's decisions. By that Tuesday, civil rights attorney Ben Crump had agreed to assist the Reed family as well. Crump is known nationally for representing families in cases of brutality, civil rights violations, or suspicious deaths, so this instilled a small glimmer of hope for the family. At the press conference, the family requested access to any surveillance footage from the campus that might shed some light on Trey's final movements. DSU, like most campuses, does have security cameras. Attorney Vanessa Jones stated, quote, "If this young man was on the campus of Delta State University with all these cameras and all this modern technology, from the moment that he left his dorm room or entered the campus, there should be surveillance of all of his actions. That's what we want. Bring the surveillance, bring the cameras so we can know exactly what happened," unquote. At that point, the family had not been shown any video evidence, and they were growing suspicious that something was being hidden. When asked about this at a press conference later on, Campus Police Chief Mike Peeler confirmed that there are videos and they're in the hands of the investigators. However, Peeler would not specify what those videos contain. For example, he wouldn't say whether any camera captured Trey in the moments leading up to his death, and he said that this is due to the active investigation. University officials also stated that they could not release any footage publicly until the investigation was completed. The family's stance, though, was that transparency should come sooner rather than later. They didn't want critical evidence kept under wraps because it could either calm their fears or show foul play. President Dan Ennis held a press conference on Wednesday, September 17th, to address everything and respond to the family's concerns. He expressed sorrow for Trey's death and acknowledged the pain that it had caused. He said, quote, "Our community is deeply saddened by this loss, and my heartbreak is comprehensive, primarily for Trey, but also for the fact that the rest of the world has an impression of Delta State that is so at odds with what I know this institution to be. One of the things that I love about Delta State is that it's what America should be. I'm not saying this is heaven, but I can walk into my cafeteria right now and see Black people and white people eating together," end quote. By mentioning the university's diversity and harmony, Ennis was trying to address the speculation that racism or a hostile campus climate might have played a role in Trey's death. He also asked people to please not rush to view this tragedy through the lens of Mississippi's racial history without any evidence to back that. How can people not make assumptions, though, if the evidence isn't being publicly shared? He seemed to understand why many people felt that this was history repeating itself in this case, even though he maintained that DSU was a welcoming place for students of all races. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, because I understand that administrators' roles are to protect their company, or in this case, their school. But in my opinion, this didn't land how he intended it to. President Ennis also addressed the family's complaint of not being contacted by the school. He explained that protocol required the university to communicate with the next of kin listed by the student during registration, and Trey had provided 2 names on his emergency contact forms. He said, quote, "From the moment we discovered him, this university has been in regular, frequent contact with the next of kin. Trey Reed gave us 2 names. From the point of respecting the students' wishes, the university has been and will continue to be in direct contact with Trey's chosen names," end quote. They didn't release those names, and this could explain maybe a little bit of the communication gap, but Trey's mother, Sophia, and grandparents still felt ignored by the institution that was supposed to care for Trey. At the press conference, Vanessa Jones outright contradicted Ennis by saying the president of Delta State University has not taken 30 seconds and called Trey's family, calling the school's claims of being supportive a completely false narrative. Meanwhile, law enforcement begged for patience. Cleveland Police Chief Charles Buster Bingham said that investigators are waiting for the full autopsy results and that they would follow the evidence wherever it led them. Bolivar County Sheriff Kevin Williams Sr. also asked the community to avoid speculating until scientific findings came in. But for the family and the public, patience was hard to come by given the alarming nature of what happened. In the days immediately following Trey's death, social media exploded with debates and theories, which we will get into here shortly. On September 18th, 3 days after Trey was found, the state medical examiner released preliminary autopsy results. Trey Reed's death was determined to have no foul play, meaning that Trey had to have done this to himself. In other words, they found nothing in the autopsy to suggest homicide, no hidden strangulation marks beyond the ligature from the hanging, and no internal injuries like hemorrhaging or skull fractures that couldn't be explained by this being done by anyone but himself. All signs pointed to death by asphyxiation from hanging. The Bolivar County Coroner's Office agreed with this, and the cause of death was officially certified to reflect those findings. The completion of the state autopsy was an important investigative milestone. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, or MBI, and local police continued to process evidence from the scene. Every piece of the physical environment was examined, including any footprints or disturbances in the area, Trey's personal belongings like his backpack and his phone, and police also collected any surveillance videos from the campus cameras covering Trey's route that night and or morning. Chief Peeler confirmed that those videos were in their possession, but he didn't describe what was in them. Investigators also interviewed people who had contact with Trey in the final hours, including dorm mates, classmates, and possibly a student who reportedly saw Trey the night before, and they said that he looked upset. Officials have kept the specifics of those interviews under wraps, though. By September 27th, 2025, Trey's loved ones held his funeral and laid him to rest in Grenada. Between the state autopsy and the funeral, a second autopsy had been quietly conducted at the family's request. With the help of Ben Crump's team, Trey's body was examined by an independent pathologist before burial to ensure that no evidence was missed. This independent exam was funded by the Know Your Rights Camp Autopsy Initiative, which is an effort by Colin Kaepernick to support families seeking second autopsies, especially in cases of deaths that need a second opinion. The pathologist chosen was Dr. Okoye, and he is a highly experienced forensic pathologist and former chief medical officer in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Okoye flew in from Nebraska to perform this autopsy, which was completed prior to the funeral on September 27th. At the time that I'm recording this video in mid-October, the results of this second autopsy have not been made public. Crump's office released to the media on October 2nd that Dr. Okoye's report has not been finalized and that no details would be released until it was. This did not stop constant speculation, though. Based on what Crump, Jones, and the family are saying, any conclusions from the independent autopsy will be shared with the family first, and then possibly the public and the authorities. Mississippi officials said that they would welcome the second autopsy results when available, but for now, the state's ruling remained the sole official conclusion, and the case has not been reclassified as anything else. Law enforcement urged people to allow the process to play out, and according to the police, they have continued to follow up on all leads. Delta State's Chief Peeler also emphasized that investigators remained open-minded but had no reason currently to suspect foul play, adding that it is still an active investigation, though. From the moment news of Trey Reed's death hit social media, speculation spread like wildfire. The scenario of a young Black man found hanging from a tree in Mississippi immediately raised suspicions of a history repeating itself, given the state's notorious history that I'm sure we are all aware of. We're talking about Mississippi here. Within hours, hashtags with Trey's name began trending everywhere, and posts about the case have been shared hundreds of thousands of times, and it is very important to keep Trey's name out there. Unfortunately, along with genuine concern came a flood of unverified claims and rumors, which can add a lot of confusion and pain for the family. I want to talk a little bit about that now. Something that I've seen a lot of discussion about online is that a second hanging occurred on the same day as Trey's. On September 15th, a few hours after Trey was found, police in Vicksburg, which is about 100 miles south of DSU, discovered the body of another man hanging from a tree in a wooded area. Social media quickly linked the two hangings, with some suggesting that they were somehow coordinated murders or a part of a pattern. Something that initially crossed my mind was to find out if maybe there's some kind of historical significance of this date. I did a deep dive and I didn't identify any overt patterns on that date, though. However, the circumstances of the Vicksburg case were very different from Trey's. This man was identified as 35-year-old Corey Zucaitis, who is a white male from Brandon, Mississippi. He was known to be homeless in the area, and Zucaitis' body was found in a patch of woods near a city street in Vicksburg, and local authorities there thoroughly investigated his death, but separate from Trey's. By early October, the Mississippi State Medical Examiner officially determined that Corey Zucaitis had done this to himself with zero evidence, once again, of foul play. Being homeless oftentimes comes with a lot of psychosocial challenges, which may lead us to believe that Corey didn't want to be alive anymore, but based on what we know from Trey's aunt, that didn't seem to be the case whatsoever for Trey. One of the first theories to gain traction was that Trey's body had shown signs of severe injury that would contradict a death by hanging. Posts everywhere began circulating alleging that Trey had broken bones, including 2 broken legs and other trauma, suggesting that he may have been attacked and possibly murdered before being found. This began on social media, and it struck a chord because if true, it would absolutely be a homicide. I actually saw a TikTok about this from someone online that said he was Trey's cousin. He said that the family stated Trey had these injuries, but later, I believe, it came out that he had no connection to the family. If you remember which video I'm talking about, let me know in the comments down below. Local authorities moved quickly to shut this down as misinformation, though. Deputy Coroner Murray Rourke told the press on that day he saw no evidence of broken limbs or any other injuries on Trey's body. Bolivar County Coroner's Office explicitly stated that their exam found no broken bones whatsoever. The coroner's preliminary report stated that Trey had not suffered from any lacerations or cuts, contusions or bruises, compound fractures, or any injuries consistent with an assault. This directly addressed and debunked the swirling rumors of shattered bones. Without the results of that second autopsy to compare to the first, though, this is all we currently have to go off of. The Reed family's decision to seek a second opinion was public knowledge, and many people are still hoping and praying for more answers from this. Around the first week of October, some people on social media began claiming that they knew the results of Dr. Okoye's autopsy, even though nothing had been officially released to the public. There are videos and posts saying that this second autopsy found signs of blunt force trauma to Trey's head, suggesting that he had been beaten or injured prior to death. If true, this would mean that Trey, without a doubt, died by homicide, and that would change everything. These allegations exploded on social media. Posts, videos, and articles are still circulating that say independent autopsy shows Trey was murdered by blunt force trauma and authorities lied. However, as of October 11th, no official report or verified sources have corroborated the claim of blunt force trauma. In fact, the Reed family's legal team, including Crump, have explicitly stated that this second autopsy was not finalized and no details would be released until it was complete. The Clarion Ledger newspaper confirmed with Ben Crump's office that Dr. Okoye's report is still pending and anything being said publicly is not true. When journalists reached out to Dr. Okoye himself in October, he declined to comment, citing professional ethics and the family's right to see the results first. When I was digging around for more answers, I actually found that Snopes, the fact-checking website, even stepped in to address the situation. Snopes examined the viral claims that Trey's second autopsy showed blunt force trauma, and their verdict stressed that the second autopsy results haven't been released publicly, meaning that the blunt force trauma claim was unproven and coming from only secondary, unverified sources. This doesn't mean that those findings are impossible, it just means that the report hasn't been released, so what's circulating online is not true. If and when Dr. Okoye's report is released, it's going to be critical to see if it even mentions any findings of head injuries or other signs of assault that the state may have missed. We know from the past, like for instance the case of Shanquella Robinson, that autopsies sometimes do conflict one another. For example, they may have different interpretations of bruising, but they can also end up agreeing with the initial findings. Until the full report is out, the blunt force trauma claim is speculative. The Reed family's attorney have refrained from commenting on this directly, and they have said that they will share information once it's confirmed and appropriate to do so. So this needs to stop. Trey Reed's life may have been cut short, but he made a significant impact during his short life. His family and friends remember him not as a victim, but as a bright, caring young man with a full life ahead of him. Their grief is indescribable, and their only peace will come from knowing the truth about what happened that day to Trey. At Delta State University, students organized an on-campus vigil where they lit candles and shared their memories about Trey. One classmate talked about how Trey had helped her carry groceries to her dorm just days before his death, smiling and cracking jokes the entire time. She said that he was just a really nice guy and the kind of person who would be there for you even if he barely knew you. Professors described Trey as quiet but focused in class and someone who seemed genuinely excited just to be in college. The administration made counseling available and encouraged students to support one another, and the university planted a young tree on campus in Trey's memory, turning a site of tragedy into a memorial for Trey. In Trey's hometown of Granada, hundreds attended a vigil at Granada High School football field. Friends from high school talked about Trey's infectious laugh and love for sports. Family members released green and white balloons, which are Delta State's colors, into the sky as the crowd shouted, "We love you, Trey." The local clergy led prayers not just for the Reed family, but for answers and justice too. And even the mayor of Granada was there and offered condolences and promised to help the family in any way possible. It was clear that Trey's death had massively impacted the town that he grew up in. At Trey's funeral on September 27th at their home church, Trey's mother spoke during the service. She thanked everyone through her tears for their support and begged the young people in attendance to please look out for one another. She said, quote, "Trey was my baby and he had so much to live for. We don't know why he's gone, but I pray we find out. I pray no other mother has to go through this," end quote. Many in the congregation couldn't help but cry while hearing a mother speak about her son this way. One moving image from the funeral was Trey's cousins wearing t-shirts that read "Justice for Trey" under their suits. It was a reminder that even in mourning, the pursuit of answers was still their primary focus. The family's attorney, Vanessa Jones, also attended the funeral along with Ben Crump's team, and they reassured the family afterward that they would continue working on this case until they get answers. The community's support was so touching to the Reed family. As of October 11th, again, when I'm recording this, the Reed family is still waiting for the independent autopsy results and any further word from law enforcement. Their attorneys will likely make a public statement when those results come back. If the second autopsy finds no evidence of foul play, they're going to focus their efforts on understanding how and why Trey reached a point of such despair. That could involve looking at whether he was maybe facing bullying or threats on campus that weren't being addressed, whether there were stressors or maybe even mental health issues that he was hiding, and more. If the second autopsy does find something suspicious, then it will trigger an entirely new phase, changing to a homicide investigation. In the end, Trey Reed was a son, a nephew, a friend, a student, and a young man who had just begun to chase his dreams. His life was so full of promise. Trey's bright smile and his kind heart will be deeply missed by his family and his friends. The pursuit of answers continues, and the hope is that they will lead to a greater understanding, healing, and changes that ensure that no other family has to endure this torment and uncertainty in the wake of losing a loved one. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I got a DM from Oreo Skittles, and she actually said we should call these little news segments and bonus videos I've been doing checkups, like a nursing office visit, and I love that idea. So moving forward, these little bonus videos will be called checkups. I know today's video was very heavy, so I appreciate you taking the time to listen to Trey's story. As always, when we get those second autopsy results, I'll likely be doing a follow-up video. Please be good to yourselves this week and do extra self-care. Nurse's orders. I'll see you next weekend. Bye.